Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily.
A murder happened 17 years ago. We don't ever give up.
An arrest in the cold case murder of newborn twins, how police got their big break.
A Kentucky State Commission declines to appoint a new special prosecutor in the Breonna Taylor case, the meeting that ended in outcry.
So that brings
Plus, a shakeup in accused Kenosha shooter's defense team. Why prosecutors are raising ethical concerns about Kyle Rittenhouse's attorney.
And a Texas high school football player rushes the field, then slams the referee. The play that ended with the defensive lineman kicked out of the game and into jail. Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terri Austin. Illinois police announced a breakthrough in the cold case of two newborn twins found dead by a waste management employee emptying trash bins in 2003.
She saw the bodies in the front bucket of her garbage truck. A subsequent autopsy determined that the victims were born alive and died of asphyxiation, and the deaths were ruled homicides. Sheriff's police conducted a thorough investigation at that time, but the case remained unsolved. In 2018, Sheriff's police reopened the case and utilized DNA from evidence recovered from the scene in an effort to identify the birth mother using the latest developments in genetic genealogy. A breakthrough from that research and subsequent investigations allowed detectives to eventually identify Briley as the victim's potential birth mother.
Antoinette Briley is facing 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of her newborn twins about 17 years ago. Police say they conducted a thorough investigation in 2003, but the case remained unsolved. Investigators reopened the case in 2018 using the same genetic genealogy techniques used to catch the Golden State Killer.
As part of the investigation, Sheriff's police detectives traveled to Holland, Michigan, and obtained discarded items with Briley's DNA, which was then matched to the DNA from the victims. On Thursday, Sheriff's police learned that Briley was in Cook County and took her into custody after a traffic stop in Oak Lawn, Illinois. Briley was transported to the Sheriff's Police headquarters here in Maywood, where she admitted post-Miranda to her involvement in the birth, death, and disposal of the 2 deceased infants.
As always, Terri Austin is here to break down this case, and joining us is defense attorney and former prosecutor Bernarda Villalona. Terri, let's start with you. A 17-year-old cold case concludes with a single arrest, and the one question that keeps bouncing around in my head is, where's the father in all this?
You know, it's a great question, Brian. Maybe the father was unaware of the birth. It could very well be that this mother had the children and then she decided to sadly discard, and asphyxiate them, apparently. And so I'm thinking that perhaps they can still do this genetic genealogy and maybe trace it back to the father and determine whether or not he did know about this and whether or not charges should be brought against him as well.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. He's either going to be a suspect or a victim in all this. Bernarda, after they arrested Briley, she confessed to her involvement. So I'm thinking DNA plus confession. Do you see this actually being a trial case?
So, Brian, it's going to be a very difficult case to prove because of the passage of time and how much evidence may have been lost and witnesses that the people haven't been able to talk to, which doesn't work in the benefit of either party. So I don't see this actually being a trial. I'm hoping that the prosecution in this case decides to plead this case out because it's not a strong case.
All right, we're definitely keep eyes on this case and keep looking. Again, where's the father? More information being collected. A lot of investigation that still needs to be done here. Turning now to Missouri, where an arrest has been made in the St. Louis area for the murder of a pregnant woman and her fetus. Law and Crime's Antoinette Levy tells us what helped police identify the suspect.
Amethyst Killian was 5 months pregnant with a baby boy when she was stabbed to death late last month. Killian was a mother to 2 other children. The prosecutor in St. Charles, Missouri, outside of St. Louis, says Killian was stabbed more than 20 times in the head and neck. This man, Damion Delgado, faces a first-degree murder charge for the death of Killian and a second-degree murder charge for her fetus. Prosecutor Tim Lomar says blood found on a knife at the scene and nearby matched Delgado, and that they used a texting app to arrange a meeting that turned fatal, so it was not a random killing.
Further investigation revealed that Delgado was seen on surveillance video about 10 to 15 minutes before he met up with the victim at a local gas station. Department of Revenue records were reviewed, and his photo was compared to the surveillance video. We had a positive ID. The victim and Delgado had connected with one another online, and they had arranged a meeting that night in the early morning hours of November 26th.
The prosecutor in this case says that Damion Delgado has very little criminal record, so the motive in this case remains unclear, mostly because Damion Delgado isn't talking. For Law and Crime Daily, I'm Antoinette Briley.
Thanks, Antoinette, for that story. And still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, a Texas high school player gets ejected from the field, then winds up in the slammer. The move caught on camera. Plus, a state commission denies Breonna Taylor's mother's request to appoint a new special prosecutor. Why some are calling out the decision next. A Kentucky board has rejected a bid for a new prosecutor in the Breonna Taylor case. Taylor was killed in her Louisville home by police executing a no-knock search warrant. The state's Attorney General Daniel Cameron was appointed to prosecute any potential cases, but only one of the officers involved is charged. None are facing charges for her death. Taylor's mother asked the state commission to appoint a new prosecutor. The Kentucky Prosecutors Advisory Council said in a virtual hearing that it doesn't have the legal authority to do so. An announcement that was met with outrage.
Simply put, we do not have the legal authority to fulfill the request that has been submitted. I would make a motion that this finding be the position of the Prosecutors Advisory Council.
So all in favor of adopting the statements as related from Chris Coron and second by Courtney Baxter as a PAC statement, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes. Opposed.
So the council has accepted the statement unanimously, and so therefore it shall pass.
Opposed.
You're wrong and you know it.
Opposed.
I oppose.
So that brings
I have a question.
Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron announced an indictment of Brent Hankinson for wanton endangerment back in October.
We presented all of the information, and they ultimately made a determination about whether to charge. In this instance, they decided to indict Detective Hankinson. Well, what my role as the special prosecutor in this case was to provide the information and facts to the grand jury. Detective Cosgrove and Sergeant Mattingly were justified in returning fire because they were fired upon.
The governor of Virginia signed Breonna's law banning no-knock warrants statewide. The attorney for Taylor's family, Benjamin Crump, says legislation can help prevent more deaths like Taylor's in the future.
Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron will not define the legacy of Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor's legacy will be defined by people of goodwill. Breonna Taylor's legacy will be defined by people who believe in due process of the law.
Back with me are attorneys Bernarda, Villalona, and Terri Austin. Terri, attorneys representing Breonna Taylor's family said in the statement that you just heard, the council, quote, punted on the issue, inaccurately claiming that they lack the authority to actually fulfill this request. What are some of your thoughts and comments to Benjamin Crump's comments as to the council?
You know, I agree with Crump, actually. It is a very odd situation here. Yes, we have a settlement on the civil side, and yes, we have Breonna Taylor's law, but we don't have a criminal conviction of the individuals who actually were responsible for her death. And so I do think there's some level of cowardice here. I think that, you know, the police department, certainly the Attorney General's office, and now we see that this council, they all are really trying to evade the criminal process here. And I think Crump and I think Taylor's family has a right to be outraged. We've seen evidence that there's more to this story.
Now, Bernarda, this has been a long saga when it comes to Breonna Taylor, but in terms of having someone charged for the actual death of Breonna Taylor, is this the end of the road for any potential criminal charges?
That's what it looks like, Brian. Well, actually, no, because remember, the feds are still investigating the case. They have not closed their investigation into what happened that night. So that is still a possibility and a road that the family can have hope to hold on to.
So I guess we just have to wait and see how that investigation plays out. But currently, no one is being charged for the death of Breonna Taylor, only, as we said earlier, Brett Hankinson for the wanton endangerment. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, a deadly police shooting in Ohio, why the man's family is calling for an independent investigation. Plus, ethical concerns raised in the Kenosha shooting suspect's defense, why prosecutors say one of Kyle Rittenhouse's attorneys should be off the case. Next. Prosecutors in the Kyle Rittenhouse case are raising ethical concerns over one of the high-profile attorneys for the Kenosha shooting suspect. Los Angeles civil attorney John Pierce announced he's off Rittenhouse's criminal team the same day prosecutors filed a motion saying Pierce should not be allowed to represent the defendant. Pierce helped raise $2 million for Rittenhouse's bail. Kenosha County Assistant District Attorney Thomas Binger alleged that Pierce has, quote, significant personal financial difficulties and money that should be held in trust for the defendant may be used to repay Attorney Pierce's numerous creditors. Pierce tweeted out that he'll still be representing Rittenhouse's civil matters. Rittenhouse appeared in a virtual hearing with his Wisconsin attorney, Mark Richards. Terry, let me read the prosecutor's allegations here and just quote it here. Attorney Pierce's personal financial difficulties raise significant ethical concerns, specifically when he has close ties to a substantial yet unregulated and unreported, quote, slush fund that is intended solely for the benefit of the defendants. This seems more like a warning than actually saying there's a problem here, but the timing of the attorney stepping off the criminal case does raise an eyebrow or two. What are your thoughts?
Well, it is quite odd that the prosecution is looking into the personal finances of Pierce. What difference does it make whether or not Pierce has a lot of money or a little bit of money? I think the real issue here is whether or not the funds that Pierce has raised is in a trust, and it should be, and whether or not the funds are being used for his client's defense. And that's really all that matters. What I will tell you, Brian, is the timing is a bit odd that Pierce withdrew from the criminal case just as the prosecution raised this issue. It's as though he wants to avoid any more scrutiny.
Yeah. And Bernarda, let me be devil's advocate a little bit here and kind of think of this. I've got student loans. So does this mean that if I start representing a high profile person, I'm going to get a prosecutor looking at how much I owe because maybe I'm going to start spending it on my student loans? Like, this seems a little ridiculous. What do you think?
So, Brian, what it sounds like to me, because of course this is not normally done. You know, I was a prosecutor for 16 years and I'm not looking into the background of every defense attorney. I think that it's possible that there may be an investigation that the prosecution is given whiff of to the defense attorney. So because the defense attorney thinks that, oh, something may be going on, he's like, let me back up and take the attention away from myself. But in the end, all that matters is that Mr. Rittenhouse is afforded with his constitutional right to representation.
All right, Bernard, let's talk worst case scenario. This attorney, let's say he's skimming a little off the top when it comes to funds. What happens to an attorney when they do that, other than obviously disbarment?
Well, aside from disbarment, he's going to be investigated and charges may follow as a result of that. He's not immune just because he's a defense attorney. The laws apply to all of us. So there's going to be a lot of problems for him. And obviously, it's going to affect Mr. Rittenhouse's representation. So the prosecution wants to be rather safe than sorry.
Yeah, and Terry, this is like very easy rules of ethics for all lawyers. Don't commingle funds. Don't date your clients while they're clients. It just seems like a pretty simple thing. But do you think that there's a potential? I mean, the prosecutor is raising it, that where there's smoke, there could be fire?
Well, let's hope that there's something there and he's not just throwing these accusations around. But the real issue is what I mentioned before, the fact that he is now doing the civil case. So if there was a problem with the criminal case, there's going to be a problem as far as the civil case is concerned, too. And ethically, he should do the same thing for both the civil side and the criminal side. So let's hope he's not commingling these funds.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Of course, if a prosecutor is raising this, it's a pretty harsh criticism without evidence. But of course, we got to wait to see how that plays out. But when we come back, a referee blindsided as a player tackles him to the ground. The criminal charges the defensive lineman is now facing after the break. The family of an Ohio man killed by a deputy is seeking answers to what happened leading up to his death. Terri Austin has more on the ongoing investigation.
Brian, I'm still working to learn more information, but it appears the deputy involved in the incident was not wearing a body camera. 23-year-old Casey Goodson Jr. was shot by a Franklin County Sheriff's deputy. Authorities say Deputy Jason Meade was assigned to the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force. The Marshals were looking for a suspect when they encountered Goodson Jr. They say he was waving a gun. A confrontation ensued and Goodson was shot. His family disagrees, saying he was shot in the back while walking into his own home. His family also claims that he had a concealed carry permit. Goodson Jr. was not the suspect investigators were searching for. Brian?
The combination of no body-worn camera, what the officers are saying, waving a gun as a registered gun owner, then being shot in the back, it seems so hard to mesh together. Terry, we've seen this where there's no body cam video and it doesn't really go anywhere. Do you think this means the case may not go to the grand jury?
I hope it does, because this is a serious case. The fact that there was no body cam, the fact that he was walking into his own home, he wasn't carrying a gun, at least according to some of the witnesses. He was shot in the back 3 times. He's never been involved in a criminal matter. I think this is inexcusable. I think it should be investigated, and I absolutely positively think that there should be a grand jury proceeding to see whether or not charges should be brought against the police officers involved here.
Exactly. Some of the things we'll be looking out for are autopsy reports. Any eyewitnesses, of course, that information will help us in this case. Thank you, Terry. A Texas high school football player is facing charges for rushing the field and knocking a referee to the ground.
And we have 2 fouls, both on the Edinburgh High Bobcats. Late hit on the quarterback. And we'll be back.
The Edinburgh School District says MANNUEL DURON has been removed from the football team. The referee had ejected the player from the game after 2 penalties, 1 for unsportsmanlike conduct. Duron is then seen running across the field and slamming into the ref. He's charged with a Class A assault. Terry, Duron is, at the end of the day, an 18-year-old high school student athlete. Do you think that there will be some leniency considering he's still in high school?
I know he's in high school, but 18 really is the age of adult in Texas and in most states. So I think here he should have known better, and I think that the offense actually was very serious. The fact that he attacked this referee is just inexcusable. He should have known better, and I think he should be charged with assault. And frankly, I do think they should, throw the book at him, so to speak.
Definitely being charged with assault. Bernarda, maybe it's the public defender in me that thinks, depending on how bad the ref's injuries are, and I don't know them at this point, this case could probably be resolved with community service or some form of probation. Or do you see jail time or some sort of trial in this kid's future? Or sorry, young adult's future?
I don't see jail time in this young adult's future. Obviously, they have to take everything into circumstances in terms of what to do with him, and also taking into account that it was during a game, his age, probably his anger and the fuel just got the best of him. But jail time on this kind of case, no injury, I highly doubt it.
Yeah. Terri, maybe it's my bias as a former college athlete myself, but it's Texas, it's football. I feel like it's going to be like a little bit of a boys will be boys conversation when he gets to the court. Do you see this being handled kind of like, hey man, just maybe he has to ref football games for a couple weeks to give back to the community? Do you see that maybe being a resolution here?
Yeah, I do think he's not going to get jail time, but I do think he should have some sort of community service. I think I must have been a prosecutor in another life, or maybe in my next life, because I tend to lean towards the more, stringent punishment, so to speak. But I think here that we can't ignore it. I think that they should set an example, not too harsh, but at least hopefully he will learn from his actions, and this sort of thing is not going to be tolerated from him or from any of the other athletes for that matter.
And that's a big if, of course. I'm saying if the referee has minor injuries. That's a big boy. That's not a small man running after you. That's a big boy. He's a defensive linebacker. So he could have done a lot of damage. And I agree with you. If this is a student athlete who might go to college, might go to the NFL, you definitely want to kind of create that mindset of this is not allowed. This is not proper. Bernarda, always a pleasure having you on. Terri Austin, thank you so much for lending your expertise as always. And thank you for joining us. In all of these cases, we'll continue to keep watching them. But thank you for joining us here on the Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.